Eric's.
Omar.
I bring with me a very special guest here today. My tropical twin, the Blasian sensation, the man from Scarborough himself, Walter Cariazo, my friend, someone that I've known for quite a long period of time, that competed recently at IPF Worlds, where he placed fourth. A longtime listener of the cult, is that correct, Walter?
Since Mama's Boys.
Okay, so pause. I've known Walter for a decade, but he also listened to my previous podcast, what sound like he's one of the 5 people, so he is the true and faithful. But we did the clap helms. Something interesting, both of our parents, we have ancestry of people being musicians. Walter's, and Walter has rhythm. I can confirm that Walter's father was called the what?
The James Brown of the Philippines.
I love
like
it.
An actual musician. Like I'm being like no, Walter, like, and Walter has that musical skill. We get the jams that we put on when we're just moving and grooving. What do you play actually, Walter, real quick? Because it reminded me of Helms where you did the clap. Typically when you train, what type of music do you play? And like you're in the back room, right? You're getting ready to go out. Shit's getting serious. Yeah. People are listening like death metal, like whatever. Yeah. What you bumping?
I mean, it really depends on what I can gather energy from that day. Could be dance hall, it could even be R&B, it could be blues, jazz, hip hop, rap, whatever, man. You just gotta settle into that groove, and whatever gives you the energy and you feel it, that's what I take.
Let me ask you this, Walter. How often does Gap Band get played when you're training?
Quarterly. I mean, an outstanding band like that, quarterly?
It's Eric's reference and tie to funk, so you're supposed to just say outstanding, and then we could, what were you going to say, House?
I was just going to say that I have a playlist that is like mostly James Brown, Gap Band, and a few others that when I'm in the right mood, it is the chef's kiss of training compilations, personally, I think so.
But Trex, Helms, I bring Walter not only to talk about his personal story, the recent performance at IPF Worlds, once again, where he placed fourth in a very competitive 105 kg class after not competing at Worlds for 6 years, not because you didn't win nationals, but we'll get into that, like the whole cost of traveling. I think this is a really good story about being, a world-class competitor and what it takes, not just like the effort that you put in, but the financial commitment. People just think, oh, you won nationals, of course you're going to compete at Worlds, right? It's like, well, there's many different factors. But Trex, I also bring Walter. Walter right here is my representation because, Helms, we're going to play a little bit of a game. Walter speaks many different languages. He code switches alongside myself. I want you to give a question for Walter for him to get some respect from the Iron Culture to show he's been listening. Ask any question about Lord of the Rings lore, and then he's going to ask you a question in return because my man is well-versed about Lord of the Rings. Dude, it really doesn't matter, but we've dropped a lot of Lord of the Rings. So let's you can ask anything. I'm not saying that he'll potentially be able to answer it. He's going to ask something in return, but it is something that we do talk about.
All right. Let's hear it.
I'm going to give the relatively straightforward one because this is kind of, test the waters. Sauron is often represented as the biggest, baddest mofo in the Tolkien universe. Do you think that's an accurate representation in the movies that Sauron is the arch evil that is the representation of true dark powers in Middle Earth?
In the movies, I don't think so. I think they did not give enough respect to the original Dark Lord himself, Morgoth.
Boom. Hats off.
I've got one.
Go, Trex.
In Lord of the Rings, book 1, book 2, book 3.
Oh God, here we go.
A hobbit named Frodo is tasked with casting an item into a pit of lava. What is that item?
The Ring of Power.
Oh yeah. Okay, he knows his stuff.
Trex.
There you go. I give up.
That is the barrier. Trex, I love it, man, with the pop culture references. That is the level. It's like, and he's good. He knows everything about Lord of the Rings.
Absolutely. I mean, he got the plot, so that's all you can really ask for.
Let's do this. So, Walter, just ask your own question because I do want to show like Walter has listened to a lot of episodes of our culture, amongst other things. Go ahead, ask Eric any you can make it hard or moderate, easy, whatever you want.
Okay, so the kind of the predecessors to Lord of the Rings, the battle of the last alliance, the final duel between the King of Men and the King of Elves against Sauron himself. How do you feel things would have turned out if Elrond in the fires of Mount Doom has just decided, I'm just going to push Isildur into the fire and like be done with everything? What do you think the repercussions would be of that act?
Wow. I think things would have gone a lot better, personally. I mean, we could have avoided the whole drama, It's honestly, at that point, that was when things set the stage for Sauron to return and to create the entire series that we're looking for. So, yeah, I mean, Elrond's not the type of dude who's going to push Isildur into a volcano, so I understand why he didn't. But I wonder if we could have asked Elrond, decades, centuries later, hey, bro, no one was even looking. What do you think? Maybe a little, you could have slipped. You could have said whatever. Like,
Yeah.
Volcanic rocks, they're not super well connected. He fell. Tragic. Let's have a big funeral. Oh, also the ring went in. Happy
You're
luck.
welcome.
Yeah, exactly.
Trex.
Quick counterpoint, though. If someone pushed L. Ron Hubbard into the pit, then there would be no Scientology because he created that after.
This is so, Trex, you're opening up a whole other can of worms, and I love it. Almost makes me want to go into a whole tangent about Dune, but I will not. I will just say that I want to give all the respect to Walter for being here, for being a guest. It's been a long time coming. Like I said, I've known Walter for over a decade. I think we first met, 2014?
Yeah, I think it was my first meet. You came to support one of the guys at Fortis, I think Phil Chan.
Yep.
So I met a bunch of you guys there. Mr. Nigel Morden, who I knew before from U of T, and Jeremy Hamilton, who Phil decided to point out. Is like, you think you're strong, Walter? That guy right there, he benches more than you squat. I'm like, all right, that's the goal. I got to be that guy who benches what people squat at their first meet.
And guys, I've loved to see it because, like I said, it's been a decade, but Walter has been doing the damn thing. And I could say, there are many different types of lifters, but Walter truly embodies the meaning of being a lifelong lifter, a student of the game. He's someone also that has, like, we're talking off air about having like not only a real job, but then he has the side hustle where he has Twin Sons Media, his media team. He helps film for myself, Rascal, all the sorts of things we work on all these projects. But he's also a coach on top of that. So he has the third occupation. There's not a week that Walter probably works less than like 50 or 60 hours per week. In addition to that, he trains at the highest level. Like we said, he competed at Worlds in 2018, okay? And we know the level of competition as it continues to increase. So he's a 93 kg lifter, competed in Canada at Worlds, placed fourth, then went up a weight class, lifted even more 6 years later with all these time commitments. And I think almost by necessity, Helms, if you're, an elite lifter, you kind of have to be, when I say selfish, meaning that, with your time, with your energy, with your commitments, you kind of organize the entirety of your existence in order to maximize your performance. But this is what, separates Walter, why I'd say Walter is a selfless person from knowing him personally, where he gives just a whole lot of energy to other people. And he's by far one of the most robust individuals that I know. Like, we've done filming sessions. So here's a quick example, Trex. We've done filming sessions. We did like this Jance commercial. We had like my buddy Paris Butler, YouTube channel Bald Omni Man, like a bunch of other people. We're filming some stuff. Trex, it's like 11:30 because we film at this gym late at night when it's not occupied. Cool. Walter had got done his shift. He was there. He was filming. He's one of the videographers. And then for a scene, we're just like, hey, it'd be cool if someone pulled something on the deadlift. And Walter's like, no problem. He's like, what you need? I'm like, I think like 5 or 6 plates. Like, no one gives, like, it's like for a general audience, no one's. He's like, let's just lift something. And so he pulls 765 just at midnight. And this is what I mean when I say like robust, is that Walter is an athlete. We oftentimes talk about that, but it's not just like the physical composition. It's more like, the mental component that he really does have. And so it's an absolute honor. I just wanted to give all the respect to my good friend Walter, and I was yelling at the screen. We're going to give a recap at Worlds, because to say that you were close potentially to placing third is not an understatement in a very stacked class. So to see you do the damn thing and compete at the highest level, there's nothing but immense pride, respect, and for a hometown hero, shout out Scarborough to do it. Nothing but love.
Thank you, Omar. I appreciate it. Wow, I don't know what to say. I'm speechless.
And that's all the time we have. No.
So you roll a breakdown of the.
So let's start here, man. So we spoke a little bit, like all of us, off here, and I said you've been a lifelong lifter. You mentioned also this person, Jeremy Hamilton, who had the record at 220 pounds untested for a period of time, a fellow Canadian lifter, phenomenal lifter. So you're getting into powerlifting at this particular time where it's kind of exploding. But I want to back up a second here, because you're an actual athlete. Like, we joke about this stuff. Like, you played football. You played football for university here in Canada. But you picked up not powerlifting a little later, like you're in your like early to mid 20s when you actually competed. That's a little bit later than normal for like your typical lifter these days. Talk to me just about your journey, man, as a lifter, as a Scarborough man's, as someone getting into the scene. What was it like? You trained, you said, the University of Toronto. Just talk to us, man.
Yeah, so I mean, I got my start at University of Toronto. Like, football's done. I needed something to do. I didn't want to just be a weekend warrior, playing touch football or whatever, or playing in the tackle leagues. And a bunch of my teammates and friends from the gym at U of T is like, hey, you should pick up powerlifting. So, signed up for my first meet, did a mock meet at U of T because there was a powerlifting club there. And then I got bitten by the bug. And first meet was at the Toronto Pro Show, that legendary meet Toronto used to hold every year, which is now sadly no more. And then from there, just the numbers just kept going up, and I just got deeper and deeper into the sport. Did my first Worlds in 2016, qualified for Worlds in 2017. It wasn't worth it for me to go at the time. There's things going on, and I opted to go for competing in NAPFs instead in Orlando, Florida, where I met a bunch of people who you see today who are really huge in the game. Some still there, some have kind of like fallen off the radar. So that meet was historic because it was the first time that Mr. Rondell Hunt from Trinidad exploded onto the scene in 105 as a junior. Chance Mitchell was also there. Carlos Pedersen, who nearly won Sheffield at 93, also there as well, and competed this year at Worlds and is now a perennial powerhouse at 93. And here we are, 2018, competed in Calgary after winning my second nationals, and rubbed shoulders with Bryce Lewis, your good friend, and took time off. It wasn't worth it competing as I was going up to compete at the highest levels until, a breakthrough year this year. And here we are.
And I want to just take a quick second to rewind a little bit, because Trex, in a previous episode, you were talking a bit about your football journey. I want to hear quickly from Walter, because I know a lot of people that played football, and it seems like they accrued a lot of different injuries. I want to hear about your position. I want to hear about if you had to deal with anything related to that, because Trex, you shared in an episode recently how actually what happened. You broke your clavicle as a teenager. So Helms, he broke his clavicle as a teenager, and he had a separated shoulder. But then the dude said, what to you? Oh, it's just a pec sprain. You'll be fine. Like to say, like, these are serious things, right, Trex, you're saying?
Yeah, so broken clavicle and separated AC joint. I went to go see the trainer. It happened, in a practice. I go over, and they're like, yeah, you strained your pec, so you're just getting some painful pec spasms. So I would encourage you, with your shoulder in that condition, to play more football. And so I did. It's just not ideal.
But talk to me then, Walter, because like football, it's one of those sports where there's a lot of different injuries. Not like focusing on injuries, but did you emerge from football basically a whole lifter, or something that immediately, like, you were doing some training with football, and then that was the perfect kind of segue into powerlifting? Or what was that kind of just real quick initial journey like before you started like competing, winning, making a lot of improvements?
So like after I was done football, before I started powerlifting, I would say it was about 18 months. I really just had a lingering AC sprain that was preventing me from like maximizing my grip width and for the bench press basically. And then as my shoulder healed over time, I was pretty much good to go. The other thing was as many football players have, is like that patella tendonitis from all the running, the pushing, the change of direction, and you combine that with like a whole lot of squatting, Olympic lifts, deadlifts. It really puts a toll on your joints, especially your knees and ankles. And thankfully, I was able to avoid a lot of that.
And then let me ask you this, man. So, okay, so you got into competing. Can you give us just some numbers though? Because this, I've joked, Helms. I've said that Walter is me with a plus a standard deviation where he's like international. He is world class. But it's been amazing to see the journey. People will mention all the time, right, Helms? Like, oh, when I first picked up like the deadlift, I deadlift 500 pounds. It's like this self-fulfilling prophecy almost, the way that they tell their narrative, that they were meant to be a lifter. Not that Walter wasn't, like, he had some great numbers, but it truly has been like year after year, just putting in the time, putting in the work. Can you kind of frame that for the listeners where you said, okay, yeah, your first meet, then it's like 2014, 2016, you're winning nationals. Like, what are the numbers, the level of competition? This is the one thing I do want to know. What I personally find impressive, and Helms knows this, is also an enthusiast of powerlifting, is that the standard of lifting has only increased and many people fall by the wayside, right? It's just the talent pool increases. Go ahead. Oh, you're saying you yourself, Helms?
Yeah, it's funny. Like Walter's numbers have gone from respectable and actually what was considered very good in 2014 to what most people who are at that point when they first start lifting, like myself, I'm like, oh man, I'm so close to qualifying for the Arnold. And then you see the Arnold qualifications go up at a much faster rate than my own skill set and my own ability. And I never like it like, oh, the field is getting better at a faster rate than I am. Nah, man, like Walter went from mid 600s to now high 800s over time. So he's part of the rising standard, not someone who's watching it escape into the sunset as they, get progressively worse on a relative basis, like myself.
So Walter, just talk to us about that, man, because like you said, you played football, then you began this powerlifting journey. But what were the numbers? What was the progress like? What would you credit being some of the key factors with, let's say, continuously making progress? And then maybe the next thing before we open it up, I kind of just want to talk to you about the whole idea of, you're winning national titles, but you're choosing then not to compete for several different reasons. And I think that's something that doesn't get represented enough on social media where, people, because it's like their identity. I am like basically a professional lifter, like part of like a specialist class where I'm going to go and do this thing, but there's like some real world considerations. So let's rewind for a second, man. So football into lifting, can you just talk like some numbers, what the progress looked like, what were some big stones you overturned? Because it's been like big numbers you've increased every single year, 2018 Worlds and now a weight class above 2024. Come on.
So the big thing is just honestly is patience. The first year of powerlifting, I want to say I didn't really progress. Because of football, had a pretty good starting point, a really good base. Obviously, if you're competing in the collegiate level of any team sport, you're going to have some level of base talent. And really what I think it boils down to, because of that era, the pre-internet coach era, you were really at the mercy of whoever was considered like the strongest, most knowledgeable person in the gym. And they could have everything completely backwards. And for whatever reason, it just worked for them, but it doesn't work for anyone else. Everyone tries to emulate that. So luckily for me, I've always been a nerd with regards to strength training, rehab, and all that stuff. And I was surrounded by teammates who were into that stuff, and now they coach Olympians. So that really provided me the spark for the experimentation and the evidence-based quest for gains, basically. And then stumbling also too upon Mike Tushirer's reactive training stuff, because there was a guy at the gym who was actually coached by Mike for a time, Alistair McNichol.
Oh,
yeah, Alistair. Yeah, he was coached by Mike for a while. So, he gave me some pointers here or there. I took some deep dives into the RTS archives. And from there, that's what really allowed me to break through and allowed me to make progress for my first Worlds. And then post Killeen, Texas, that infamous meet, progress going up and down a little bit, and really just being able to troubleshoot and work around your plateaus and your ceilings to break to newer levels is really what it took.
Helms, let's talk about this for a second and then we'll resume, Walter. But we love this concept. What is it, Trex and Helms, that we love this whole concept of the lifelong lifter, the student of the game, as we say, someone, and we'll get into the numbers, but as everyone will hear and they will see, it was a steady amount of progress over time. Like we said, it wasn't this seismic, oh, like I'm 23, fresh out of the gate. I'm pulling like I won nationals. We have this like feedback loop of I am doing so well. I should keep doing this thing. For Walter, it's been like this slow, persistent burn of doing very well, very, very well, winning national titles. But as we said, it's like, you're you're employed full-time, you have other commitments. And the only reason I bring that up, like Helms knows this from competing, doing natural bodybuilding, like Trex, same idea, like being a competitor and having your kind of, a bucket full of other things is an entirely different story. What is it you think that we love, Helms and Trex, just to take like a few minutes here and then we'll resume the story with Walter, about the lifelong lifter, the student of the game? What do we love?
Trex, you want to start?
I mean, I would say that for the vast majority of lifters, that's what it's all about, I think there's a tiny percentage of lifters who, the second they touch a weight, they grow like a weed, or they find out that they were born with superhuman strength. But for the other 99%, being a lifelong lifter or a student of the game is really it's what we're all in it for, right? Is to learn over time, to get better over time, to experience the physical benefits of a life of lifting while also experiencing the emotional, and Helms would probably say spiritual benefits of self-mastery, right? And kind of self-actualization, growing, becoming more competent, better, more informed, etc. I mean, for a lot of folks, that it's more about the growth process than necessarily hitting a particular number or a particular placing on a podium. And I think for a lot of folks, the reason that general trajectory resonates is because it actually is quite relatable for a lot of people.
I would echo that completely. As some of my buds on Natty News Daily would call it, the blue collar bodybuilder, something that people can relate to. And I think it's really cool to see when you have people at the highest level in their sport achieving things that in our typical kind of Western culture perspective is only achievable by having kind of a dysfunctional mindset, a win at all costs mentality. And sometimes, having this kind of morbid watching a train wreck fascination with how their life explodes around them, or all that negativity, and then we believe it's required at that level, like, oh, athletes have to be unbalanced. And I think that just has not been my experience working in elite sport for a long time, and personally doing the best I can as a coach and an athlete to take it as far as you can. And I've seen many people at the highest level who, by focusing on progress and the day-to-day process, the journey, if you will, and maybe the dedication, desire, and discipline, getting to some kind of really impressive outcome. And I think that message is really, really important, because the other alternatives, when you look more at purely outcome-based, more superficial things that you get from lifting that are maybe flashier and easier to market, they become quite vapid and even destructive if that's all there is, even if you're at the highest level. How many stories have we seen of people who are either content creators, coaches, or athletes who are killing it from an objective, outcomes-based standpoint, but they descend into some kind of sad story. And it seems mostly driven by the fact that they're not getting anything deep out of their lifting journey. So I love to see stories like this where people are doing it for the love of the game, and they just happen to be at the top of the game because it fights against that narrative, which I think can be quite counterproductive towards people's extracting the most meaning and benefit out of the iron game, and then also furthering the whole community by being an example of that, so that people can see, oh, like there's other ways to do this, and it doesn't have to be like that, and that there's deeper things to extract from it. So yeah, I'll shut up, but basically what Trexler said with more words.
Yeah,
That was amazing.
Yeah, Helms, Trex, love it. Walter, talk about exactly that, like what you derive from lifting, just because like to, be clear. It's like you're not getting paid from it, like really, right? So it's not like it's not your main employment. It is not your occupation. It's not also a thing where it's like I'm going to derive either like let's say a social media following or so like you lift to lift, you enjoy to lift, you had success, but there's also periods of time when not that you weren't successful, but it wasn't this feedback loop of like, oh, I'm preparing for nationals. Oh, I'm going to worlds. That pipeline sometimes even that wouldn't exist. So like, yes, you're making progress, but what has lifting done for you? What do you derive from lifting? How has that journey been like? And then we'll talk about like some of the raw numbers, and then we'll like catch up, do like 2018, do 2024, because I know like we've had so many private conversations about lifting.
Yeah, for sure. Like to echo what Eric said earlier, it's definitely been a spiritual journey, focusing on the process rather than the outcome. You really get to derive the raw benefits of lifting and self-improvement, growth as a person, as an athlete, because it's not just about the process of getting stronger itself. It's about dealing with the rest of your life around lifting. It's not about, organizing your life around lifting. It's how can I maximize my lifting and what I get from it without it taking away from the rest of my life. And I think as a young lifter, you have very little responsibilities. You see this explosive growth, and then that's where we see the fall off. With they call it the junior burnouts, right? It's like they get into their career, responsibilities, obligations mount up, and they fall off because they're unable to keep up with everything. So at that point, for me, because I was a shift worker as I started powerlifting with 2 jobs, I had to figure out how could I maximize my lifting without impacting my shift work and vice versa. Because in my profession as well, there is a lot of burnout, just like in lifting. So to be able to draw from both aspects of my life and have them feed each other really allowed me to stay in the game. And the other is the camaraderie too. I train at a gym in Scarborough, Afterburn, and it's just a whole bunch of people who are also like-minded like myself, and they're also home to a bunch of elite level, like world-class world champion dragon boaters as well. So to have a whole bunch of elite athletes from all these different backgrounds, all these different professions, because like powerlifting, they're not paid to do it. These guys are elite, and girls are elite athletes who have full-time jobs, but they still find time to paddle, to be on the water, to get their gym sessions in. The older paddlers are starting families and they have kids and spouses, and they're still able to make it work. So being able as like powerlifters who are not locked into a team sport where you're kind of at the mercy of your team and your team practices and your competitions really like allowed us to grow as lifters on the powerlifting side.
Walter, I'm loving it. This is 2 studs, 1 Sonicas. Man's hot. What's the temperature right here, Walter, around? Ambient temperature check.
35.
About 35 degrees Celsius there. But we're doing, that's how we're glistening. We're glistening. But so we spoke about this spiritual journey. Okay, there's about to be a transfiguration here. Talk to me then about the numbers. Let's give some context. So we kind of like jumped ahead a little bit, but for people we're talking about, you don't have to recount every single powerlifting meet, but just give some numbers like how you did, like 2014, 2016, 2018, and then we'll jump a little bit ahead, like that gap between competing at Worlds in 2018 and 2024. But just talk about some numbers so people could put some respect on your name.
First meet, I want to say I squatted 215. I think I benched 155 and then deadlifted 290. First Worlds was kind of rough. The water cut almost had me. I was I was sweating out to the last minute with Stephen Manuel, who also I know one of those
Screamer.
super OGs, Screamer. We both barely just made weight, and then obviously he is who he is, and he did really well that meet, and I regressed relatively to what I did at that nationals, and then following year, NAPFs won the weight class, totaled 797 kilos in 2017, which at that point, I had the NAPF record of 340.5 kilos on the deadlift, and 2018 placed 4th, medaled in both the bench and the deadlift, and then after that, I totaled 800 at 105, weighing at 98 kilos. And then from there, I kind of took a break from international competition because the numbers weren't there. Being a starting 105 kilo, just because I won nationals and qualified worlds. It didn't necessarily mean I needed to go, just because I had the qualifications to. Because really, if you're not competitive and you're traveling all this way, especially to places like Belarus or Sweden, which are all the way across the world, and I mean, we all know about Belarus and what happened there back in the day. So I chilled, and then of course pandemic, and then emerged from the pandemic, still being able to lift. And I think that was also a very important part of the lifting journey, is who was able to find a way to lift and to progress despite, the world kind of coming to a halt. So being able to survive that and getting over that hurdle, just built resilience. And then from then on, post-pandemic, just being able to take advantage of that second renaissance of lifting that we saw. And then worlds totaled 887.5.
You did.
So 307.5 squat, 212 kilo bench press, and then 367.5 deadlift, and not nearly, that was a kind of a big miss, but getting 885 to my knees, 385 to my knees, which would have given me 905 and a spot on the World Games, but just came up short. And here we are today.
Can I paint a little background context for how kind of cool the most latest arc that obviously has a lot of history behind it for Walter?
Love it.
2024, just to give even more respect onto what he's accomplished, 2024 is a very big year for powerlifting, IPF powerlifting specifically, because it was only the prior year that they announced that the World Games, which is equivalent to the Olympics for powerlifters, it happens on a 4-year cycle. It's coming up in 2025. It's been going on for a long time, and some of the most notable names in our community, like Mike Toucher, we brought up, our World Games gold medalist. It's a very, very, very small list of people who can say, no, I'm not just a world champion at World Championships. I am a World Games champion. Very small, select list of people get to compete there. And historically, it has always been only the single ply. So when last year they announced for the first time, it's not going to just be single ply, it'll also be unequipped lifters. And they also announced the qualification criteria, like Walter said, and that is podiuming at the prior World Championships. So of course, everyone is wanting to be on the podium normally, but those spots were more coveted this year. And specifically in the 105s, it was a very not that it wasn't true in other classes as well. The 105s were among many of the highly competitive classes. Ashton Rushka, who, like Walter, has not always been able to go to Worlds because of his U.S. Army obligations. This is someone who has been a national champion for a long time in the 93s and the 105s to kind of parallel his journey. Finally got to come over. He switched back to Powerlifting America into the IPF after the USAPL split and competing there and having some epic battles with Bob Matthews as well as Keenan and going to Korea. He has now come. So everyone's going, oh my God, Ashton's coming. And they're also going, oh, and he's going to have the showdown with Anatoly, the Terminator from Ukraine, has been dealing with, the war there, but still showing up and crushing it, having battles at Sheffield. And seeming to be maybe finally facing a challenger who could take him, Ashton Rushka. And then also there is former world champion Emil Norling, who is no slouch himself, having totaled in the 920s. So like this battle was very much seen as like these three prior world champions, Ashton being a prior junior world champion, multiple-time national champion, and then of course Anatoly and Emil both being world champions. It's all focused on them. And we did the King of the Lift, podcast. We were looking at locking those three in the top three. So Walter working in the dark, and he wasn't just close. He was real close to getting that third spot. He went 8 for 9 and then put on, like you said, maybe it wasn't there on the day, the 385 to get you on the podium. But this isn't the first time you've attempted that. You have pulled 376 previously, and you've taken a shot at this number before. So you obviously thought, this is within the realm of, on a good day, what I can do. And if you had made that third deadlift, you would be punching your ticket at the World Games, and you were not on the radar at all. Which I think it's like, in some ways you could be like, hey, where's the respect, where's the recognition? In other ways you could be like, yeah, man, I'm coming out of the shadows, I'm swooping down, I am Batman. You didn't even know I was there. So I would love to hear, for you, what was that experience like? And to be honest, like, you've been in some tight battles. Like, people don't understand how much depth there is in the CPU. Like, you've put up some big numbers and not even won nationals recent years. So for you to be there and be in that position, a lot of things had to come together. So I'd love to hear from you what that experience was like.
The experience, I love being the underdog. I like being in the shadows. For me, it's it takes a lot of the heat off, but also I love to see like the looks and like the surprises on people's faces, like, oh my God, who is this guy? Where did he come from? That was the case also like in 2017 for NAPFs as well. And even in 2018, where I faced a similar situation, similar results, I went up against your boy, Ellis McLean in Calgary. And that was like the prelude to another 105 showdown, which is also probably one of the most competitive in history as well, with our man Bryce Lewis winning it all that year, and that was insane. But the prep, the having the confidence and taking the pressure off as being the underdog really helped. And for me, like not being recognized or not being known didn't bother me at all, because I mean I don't lift for any of that. Like the clout-based lifting or like for the recognition. Like I tell people, like if there were no cameras, or if there's no phone, or there's no IPF, I'd still be lifting. I'd still be in the gym, and I'm going to be lifting till I die.
Let's go.
And
let's go.
I can testify to this. Like, some people say that and they're not actually about that life, but Walter is 1,000%. I just want to give a few quick examples, and then I do want you to recount in a little bit more detail 2024, like how the prep went, that momentum where I saw like firsthand. But there's so many different examples. So one of them would be we trained one time in the morning, and you just got done a morning shift, and he's like prepping for nationals, like Eric. And these are like like big meets, like this and that, like so much is riding on this. And of course, Walter, you try to prepare everything else outside of that. It's like, but that session was particularly tough due to all those factors. And your job is so this is another thing too, is your occupation is a physical occupation. So it's not like you're fresh, you know what I mean, coming into this. So it's like there's really grueling elements to this, working in the dark, as you said, with like no one really knowing about it. There's another great story, Helms, of we went to this gym, this like they call it, there's so many meccas apparently, but the bodybuilding mecca of Canada. Allegedly. Pure, but he's squatting, so he was there. And they're just on like some YOLO Bros Trex, and you were squatting, I think like 6 or 7, like a lot of plates, and they come up to, because like he's not on the radar. This is like, it's called Pure Muscle. They have the Canadian flag where like they like putting like Canadian athletes on. Meanwhile, here's like, how many times had you won nationals at that point? 3, 4? How many? 3. Like national powerlifting champ, like clearly like one of the dudes that they should be talking about, but no one knew who he was. And like these kids, I took a photo after, because like these 5 like YOLO like broccoli bros, yeah, just saw like Walter, just like body like 700 pounds or like whatever. And they're like, who are you? Like, what are you? How did you get this from? their mind, like they're trying to like compute it in real life. So like Helms, to say Walter, you're truly working like kind of behind the scenes. Like I could testify that 1,000%. You inspired me actually to go on this like long bulk recently. We went from 93 to now to 105. Can you just talk to me about like essentially what sustained you? Because like, so you took basically 6 years off between competing at Worlds and now recently, and you came back with arguably like a better performance, better than ever. Yeah. Father Time's ticking for all of us, every single person listening to this podcast. How did you establish this momentum to have arguably your best possible performance? And then I actually want to talk about that performance, the game day handling that occurred, all the different choices, because there's optionality there, right? In terms of what you could have done. And exactly, Helms, I think you did a fantastic job of, explaining basically you have like 3 world champions essentially that you're competing against, Walter. All of them, people are thinking like what position are they going to be? And you're just right there behind the scenes. So first, what sustained you? What allowed this momentum to happen again? This second renaissance, as you said, in 2024. Let's talk about that for a second.
I think it really is it's about stabilizing my life. After the pandemic, when stuff was a mess, and obviously like working in healthcare in medical imaging, which is frontline, and you're dealing with everyone because obviously with COVID, it's a respiratory disease. What do? They shoot chest X-rays, they scan you with CTs. People get blood clots, so they gotta be intervened upon in interventional radiology. So we're in there standing with lead, for hours on end, dealing with these patients, and the dehydration, the standing, the body stress, and then just being able to come out of that, it just really hardened me physically and emotionally. And then once all of that stuff cleared, skies was the limit, because I figured out how to minimize the effect of lifting on the rest of my life. And after being able to really minimize and optimize my lifting, with programming with my coach, Austin Ryan, shout out to Austin of Apex Power. Yeah, he just won a Canadian National and is on his way to natural World Championships of Strongman. Being able to take advantage of that extra headspace and that emotional reserve that I've been able to clear and bolster through all that stressful time in my life has really just been able to allow me to progress even further.
And so Walter, let's talk about that then, man. So 2024, so you won nationals. Nationals was also, as you said, very competitive. But what was your mental state like? So nationals were already going to be tough. You had to prep for that, and then you have the prep for world. What were you thinking during that whole time? And then can you talk to us about the actual? So here's a great example. You mentioned, shout out to Carlos, the Guyanese lifter, where due to delays and so forth, like he had an extreme example where he got off the plane, then had to weigh in and compete.
Yeah.
But people don't understand, like Helms, you've been there with Jess, with like Bryce Lewis, so on and so forth. Like there's a lot of things that go on, and they can affect kind of your performance. So talk to us about this momentum now. So like nationals, your mental state, and then talk to us about like these game day choices. You arriving, so you're flying, as you say, like halfway around the world to Lithuania to compete at Worlds. Like what was that like? What was that experience on that day? What were you thinking? Give us the full recounting, man.
So thankfully, I was able to arrive there earlier. I arrived 6 days out, and just being a shift worker, being able to shift my sleep and recover from the flight really allowed me to zone in and dial in for the next 5 days leading up to the meet. I actually felt really good on meet day. I weighed in light at 102 kilos, and from then on, Garrett, Bryce, and Ryan Stin of the Canadian national team coaching staff just did what they could to put me in the best position to win. It wasn't really necessarily about maxing out every single lift going into the deadlift, because you have to kind of figure you shave a little bit here, a little bit there to maximize the deadlift. Because let's say, you empty the tank on squat, that kills your legs, especially if you are a lifter that uses a lot of their legs in the deadlift. So being able to conserve energy, let's say you shave off 2.5, 5 kilos on your squat and bench, and that translates to an extra 10 to 15 on deadlift. So that was basically the game plan, was to not empty the tank on squat and bench, and then to basically follow whoever was in third place, and then being able to utilize having a big deadlift in the back pocket. And I'm sure, Eric, you're very well versed and very well experienced in that regard, being a coach of both Bryce and Jess, who are also very big pullers.
Yeah, it's one of the weapons. It's one of the things that if there's two lifters who are very similar totals, there's a couple of things you check, like, all right, who's got lot advantage, who's got the bigger deadlift, who weighs less, who's potentially got a chip if they were able to set a record on either their first or second deadlift, which is less likely, or their squat and bench. And I would say the most important one of those is having the biggest deadlift. So, quick question for you, Walter. You attempted, I think, the same number or close to it in Canada on your third pull. How close was it then? Because I didn't get to see that meet, the 385 or 386 attempt when you were doing regionals.
The 386, I got it to about the same level. I think I got a little bit higher at that Centrals meet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the first time you'd attempted it at World, so you thought it was potentially there. That was probably, I'd imagine,
yeah,
for the listener, one of the things you do when you speak to your game day handlers is they go like, hey, what is your top end on each of these lifts? And I imagine the conversation was, I could maybe pull in the 380s. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Garrett and I had a conversation before either of us left Canada. And I think it was very important to have one while we were both in a sound state of mind. We weren't emotionally charged, and to go over our game day goals and work from there, because we knew that I had a shot at the podium and we weren't trying to blow that over, trying to be overzealous on any of the 3 lifts, especially the deadlifts, because that's one that you can change. So that's why I think it is the most important lift, because it's the only one you could change.
Yep.
Spoken like a true puller. Let's talk about that for a second, though. Let's talk about the showdown with the deadlifts, Walter, because as you said, I was watching it with my mom, with my brother. And after I saw Emil's second deadlift that looked tough for that man, I'm just saying, I was like, oh, we're cooking. Like, Walter's about to come out here, Trex, and I think 3rd place, like punching his ticket to World Games, which I know was the goal that you had. It's there. But can you talk to me what you're thinking about with the deadlift showdown, but also just talk about the mindset of what we can only describe as being an elite level lifter, where you have multiple different gears you could turn into overdrive, where what for other people is like, well, wait a second, you're going to attempt, like, just an example, like this you've attempted before, but like 30 more pounds, 15 more kgs than you've ever done before. Like, that seems crazy. Like, did you not see how your second looked? And yet, like, you're able to dive deep into something where there's a very real possibility of basically doing almost the unimaginable. So talk to us about this deadlift battle we've been referring to, where, you have Ashton, you have Anatoly, the first and second, like, they're basically like, they're locked in for first and second. So it's like a battle for third. And it's between you and a former world champion, Emil, who also competed at Sheffield. He's doing his deadlift his second. Like, just talk to me about your mental state of like what you're thinking, what you're seeing, all those sorts of things.
So leading him up into 3rd deads, really I was trying to just focus on myself and maintain that flow state of lifting. The guys who are coaching us really did a good job of managing the meet and the competition. And I think just being able to focus on the bar and putting the weights up really freed up a lot of that mental energy. And I think that is huge. If you have that much confidence in your coaching staff, I didn't ask them for any attempts. They just said, this is what's going on the bar. And it really aligned with what I was also thinking. They'd ask for some feedback. They say, how many kilos do you have left? You think you have left in you? And it was really just a very well communicated process. And then I didn't even really know what I had totaled at that point. I put the phone down. I wasn't even listening to music. I was just kind of in my own corner, just getting ready to go for whatever was on the bar. And I did catch a peek of Emil's last deadlift, and I thought, oh, maybe this is it. This is here. And then he got it, and I'm like, all right, we're gonna have to. This is do or die time, and that's all you had to do. Just do the damn thing.
And it's really impressive, because so what people don't understand is that at Worlds, it's not time to pull for PRs. Unless you happen to be in like the B group, or like you're outside of the top 10, you're not even really getting team points. And yeah, you get whatever you can get out of yourself on the day. But for everybody else, it is really a focus on placings, and you will often see slightly lower totals out of lifters at Worlds than you will see in their regional meets, where they can, shoot for the moon, especially for good lifters like yourself, who are typically outpacing people in second and third, at least in smaller nations. But correct me if I'm wrong, but 307.5 squat, a 212.5 bench, those are both meet PRs, if not all-time PRs, right? Even though you were focused on, let's just take what's there.
Yeah, that was an all-time squat PR, and I was a matched bench PR, which I benched on a fat pad. My all-time best bench was 215 on a fat pad in the gym. So yeah, things especially with the bench, I think are really sensitive to game day, and it's really hard to like put your best on bench on game day of the 3 lifts, I think.
Yeah. So I think it's a testament to both you being in that flow state, the prep that you had leading into it, and the Canadian national team coaches, that you were at meet PR, at least, if not equal all-time PR on both the squat and the bench, going, 6 for 6 going into the deadlift. And then when you went to attempt that 385, you were already 8 for 9 and having pulled something that was, really impressive. 367.5 is an incredible deadlift. And now you were in that position through intelligent hard work to get to that point and a collaboration between a lot of people. So it's hard to do that, especially when we're talking about doing it in Lithuania, like all respect to Emil Norling, but he had a little bit less travel to do, than you. So I think it was truly a masterclass on collaboration and how to put an athlete in the best position to take their best shot. And you managed to come away with your best total on the platform and not getting your last deadlift. And potentially you could have put another, 10 kilos on your total and being nearly at 900 if you weren't shooting for that bronze spot. So your progression and the positioning that you had, I think, was second to none. It was excellent.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
So a few more questions, and then I want to turn over Trex to you, man. And the first would be, Walter, you took some time away. So you competed, you did the damn thing. Also, shout out to frequent Iron Culture guest, Jess Bittner, who competed at the same time as you, correct?
Correct. She was there in the A flight for the primetime session on that Friday.
What a session. But I just want to give a shout out. But you took some time. You went to Spain, a little vacation afterwards, a little digesting what happened, so on and so forth. What's kind of next for you then, where, you had this, so it's like 6 years later, come back, be super competitive, a lot of resources, and that's why we kind of mentioned before, where it takes a lot of time, even financial commitment, right? When you are not a lifter, like an influencer lifter, and I mean nothing by that, but like it's your occupation, there's a lot of expense. Like you're taking time off of your literal work to do this. Like there's so many different things. So like you have to really feel that it's worthwhile for you to do that. But you had this tremendous, let's call it like comeback performance. I don't know how you want to call it, but then you had time to reflect. What are you thinking? What do you think the next steps would be for you?
To go back. Then in short, to go back is Worlds in Germany next year. We have our Canadian nationals in, I think, 8 or 9 weeks. It's a very short turnover, and we shot our world teams in the foot by having nationals so close to worlds. So it's just being able to maintain and keep the momentum going.
And then the very final question, and I want to give it over to Trex. So you said in your post where you made the post, like you're kind of recapping things, you gave a shout out to Scarborough. And people that are not familiar with Scarborough compared to, let's say, Toronto or Scarborough in particular, what is Scarborough? Like, where we're talking about you're a Scarborough man's doing the damn thing, putting it on the map. It's a place that often I would say we could get into it a little bit for the GTA does not get enough respect. But you're out there doing the damn thing, just, working basically in silence. What does it feel like to represent, let's say, like both Canada, but also like kind of your family, like all those sorts of things? Because I saw like your posts and some of the things that you wrote about.
Yeah, I mean, Scarborough, east end of in the city, very tight knit powerlifting community there. There's 2 very big powerlifting gyms there. Obviously, Afterburn, where I train. There's also Band of Barbells, literally down the street from where we are. And there's just been 2 powerlifting communities, that heavily intertwined. The owner, Dan, is a very good friend of mine, actually a family friend. It's weird. Even our parents have actually met separately, completely like out of context, and became friends. And then one day my mom was like, "Hey, do you know this guy named Dan? He's a Filipino. He owns a gym." Like, "Oh yeah, we've been friends for like a few years now." He's like, "Oh, I just met his mom. We've become really good friends." Like, well, I don't know what to tell you, but that's that. And then, yeah, just being able to see that community grow in front of my eyes and being able to represent and give back to that community that has given me so much, because it's something unlike anything we've ever seen or anything I've ever seen in my time powerlifting.
Trex, I'm going to kick it over to you. I'll have the final question, but Trex, I want to kick it over to you. So back when powerlifting was powerlifting, when we used to do, did you know, did I tell you that Trex actually, like for real, had a state squat record, right? Was it 500 pounds?
Squatted 500 back when that meant something.
still means something. Wait, but was it the 181 class or what class was it?
Yeah, and in my defense, it was in the 181 class, and I actually was really kicking around the idea of cutting to 165 for that meet, because for the majority of my meet prep, I was like square in the middle, like right between 165 and 181. But I decided food is nice, and I just wanted to hit that number. I wasn't too worried about body weight ratio, so I decided to eat plenty, and I ended up weighing in at like 178 with a nice full belly.
There are no weight classes in the jungle, Trex, as we know. So that was the right call. Real quick, and then Trex, I want you to ask a question. What Walter did kind of reminds me. You mentioned Jeremy Hamilton, so phenomenal once again. Canadian powerlifter, owns a gym in Canada called Forest West. But he was such an underdog, Helms, that Brandon Lilly, who had that quote, "There's no weight classes in the jungle." I was there when Jeremy took on Dan Green, and basically the first time that Dan Green got dethroned, Jeremy broke the all-time record, got the 220 untested, amazing stuff. But people were so surprised; they did not understand what was going on. It was like it was an insane crowd. Boss of Bosses too, I believe, like 300-400, maybe 500 people.
Wait, where was that?
So that would be 2015. So Brandon Lilly had to explain to the audience what was going on because they didn't understand, Trex, that like Jeremy, like if he pulls this, he wins. They're like, Dan Green's a fantastic powerlifter. I'm not saying it, but just like they were not following along because also it's 2015. There's like no real like leaderboard like to give context. Yeah. But Brandon was like, folks, I don't think because no one was like cheering. He's like, folks, I don't think you understand. If Jeremy pulls this, he is the world champion. And then people are like, oh, you know, they got excited. Like they had no idea.
Yeah. No, yeah. So, like you said, Omar, back in the day, when powerlifting, as Helms alluded to, was not what it is today. I dabbled in powerlifting, got the old 500-pound squat, held that state record for at least 13 days, maybe even 14. I don't know what time it got broke, but it got broke by a little-known, generally unliked person named John Downing. Not really worth getting into it.
Don't Google him.
Yeah, he does nothing good for the worldwide lifting community, so he's just a selfish guy. John Downing and I actually were both we were in the inaugural, like first ever, we were founding members of Ohio State's Barbell Club, which I think eventually went on to win some kind of collegiate national championship in powerlifting. But yeah, we were founding members, and I remember thinking I was super strong at the time because the powerlifting world was very like fractured and very siloed. You didn't really know who was out there being strong, and the sport hadn't really grown yet. And I remember lifting with John Downing for the first time and being like, holy crap, that there is a different level of strength out there. But I did have a question, if I may. So Walter, you alluded to, during that big stretch away from competition, 2018 to 2024, you mentioned COVID and then the lockdowns and kind of getting through that. And I'm curious to hear what your training looked like during those lockdowns and what your lifting situation was like. Because I know a lot of people in the iron game, some people had a good situation where they could actually lift consistently. Other people had to get, really, really creative and had to kind of just accept that there was going to be a lot of detraining and retraining. So were you able to use that time, with access to barbells as a time to actually continue progressing? Or was that the type of thing where it was more getting healthy, getting right, trying to maintain what you got, and then kind of shifting your focus to the time after?
So thankfully, at the start of the pandemic, I was lucky enough to have access to equipment. The owner of Afterburn basically gave away for a rent a lot of the equipment in the gym to the members. So with my two roommates who are also members of the gym, we're tight. We got to bring some of the stuff home. We brought the combo rack that was owned by the powerlifting club back to our garage, so we were able to train. And then my close friend and roommate Phil, who was actually started a clinic. So he built a chiro and rehab clinic, Lotus Spine. Shout out to Lotus Spine and Dr. Phil Liu, and his wife Jenna. So I spent a lot of the pandemic with them. being their roommates, and I was just able to train there. Not necessarily being able to make progress. I was working through some nagging quad injuries from just from lifting at that point in time. And it really wasn't until like after we came out of that I was able to really make big strides in progress.
Yeah. Well, that's a heck of a situation for during lockdown where you're like hanging out with chiropractors 24/7 and just hitting workouts in the garage. But obviously, you know, especially when you're training around things, you got nagging injuries. You certainly would prefer to have the full complement of a well-equipped gym. But yeah, so it sounds like after that, though, you were able to kind of, I mean, you made such big strides over that time period. I assume that post lockdowns, that's when things really started to kind of heat up in terms of progress.
Yeah, exactly. Modifications to training as well, and just being able to have a really flexible training program week to week really benefited to that. And I'm sure Eric, you could attest to that, of coaching Jess for such a long period of time with the kind of work that she does as well. I mean, I see Jess every once in a while, and we kind of trade stories and bounce ideas off each other on with regards to training and being able to manage professional life while also competing at a high level.
Yeah, and you did mention, if I may, earlier, you mentioned something that kind of struck my ear, that during that period, you were able to kind of tweak your training in a way that gave you more flexibility to kind of integrate training into your life and not have to feel like all these different buckets were totally full and conflicting with each other. And when I heard that initially, it made me think maybe you were changing up your training volume or your training frequency. But what you just mentioned sounds like perhaps auto-regulation was more of the big thing that kind of gave you that flexibility. Was it one or both of those kind of routes, or something that I'm not thinking of?
Both, and actually it was in the weekly cycle, being able to shuffle days around, like whole workouts around, or being able to chop a workout in half and spread it out over 2 days, or compress a workout from 2 days into 1 day. So yeah, like with my profession, like if I'm on call, you know, there's a high likelihood of being called in and interrupting my workout. So being able to stop that workout and move it to the next day, or even after I'm finished that call, to come back if there's enough time in the day to finish that workout. Or if I know I'm going to be super busy, to front load one end of the week versus the other. Or yeah, like I said earlier, cut a workout in half and split it into 2 days.
Yeah. And I love that as a coach. I mean, that's always been the way I approach coaching, is like, here is how I would arrange these workouts throughout the week. Personally, I'd go in and do this as a session, that as a session. I would do them in this order, because then the Monday workout is kind of planned so that it's not going to interfere with the Tuesday workout in terms of, but I always tell my clients, like, plan A is everything goes in order and things are perfect and great. Plan B is just get this stuff done. And if you got to cut it in half, cut it in half. If you got to move Friday to Monday and Monday to Thursday, do what you got to do. So I think that that's a really powerful thing that people, and I actually typically prefer to coach people who are non-competitive. Like, I usually work more with general population folks who are just kind of hobbyists. They love training, but they are not getting ready for nationals or worlds. And I think it's really powerful to kind of highlight the fact that scaling all the way down from zero competition to people like you who are literally the best in the world, some of these different strategies, it feels like you're taking a shortcut or a cop-out and not getting the program done the right way. But in reality, those little areas to add flexibility can be huge, even for elite athletes.
Exactly. And the other thing is being able to, you know, you miss a session here or there, you get the most priority sessions in, and then you use that as an advantage to take extra recovery. Like, let's say you have a big squat and a big deadlift in the same week, and you know that next week's going to be even better, but it's going to be even tougher, and your week is compressed. Rather than dig yourself in a deeper fatigue or recovery hole, you have to miss a session, you get rid of one of those sessions, and that just gives you a better chance at the even tougher session the next week. And then
absolutely.
Yeah. And then also not thinking about having every workout is your best workout, but like one workout sets you up for the next workout, and you're building momentum that way. You're just chipping away and not trying to kill yourself every workout, because then it's about stacking the small progress day to day, week to week, set to set, as opposed to, trying to go hard and break past barriers every week.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like you mentioned, I've had clients who, crazy week, it happens. A lot of my clients have high stress jobs, unpredictable jobs, back when I had a full roster. And they'd say, hey, I got 1 day left this week and I got 2 workouts left. What do we do here? And I don't say jam both of those workouts into some big marathon session. More often than not, I say the 2 most important lifts from session A and the 2 most important lifts from session B, let's stitch those together and kind of create a hybrid session. And we're, like you said, we're kind of hitting our priorities for the week. I don't really care that you skip 3 sets of bicep curls. We'll put that in the recovery bank, and we'll move on to fight another week. So yeah, it's fantastic seeing how some of these practical strategies really do span the spectrum from non-competitive all the way to the best of the best.
Hypertrophy bros are absolutely in shambles right now after what you just said. They're like, the 3 sets, what's going to happen? But I do want to say, to wrap it around a full circle, we spoke about this a little bit off air, but also I did mention it where, you work in medical imaging, and that's why you'll find this funny, Helms, that when a big boy or girl needs to be moved, they call in Walter because you're actually literally flipping in body. So that's why I said it's a physical occupation. But also, there's a creative component to my man, Walter. Twin Sons Media, which he co-owns, which is a media company here in Toronto. Walter's worked, like I said, a lot of the Rascal ads you see, Walter's worked on, the YouTube stuff, so on and so forth. So, like, there's so many different dimensions, and even that's why I was mentioning, like, Helms, we know, like, your journey, like, natural bodybuilding, powerlifting, Trex, like, you had 13 days is still 13 days, okay? You had the Ohio state record. We're about the damn thing. Your side hustle, so you have your main occupation, then you have the 2 side hustles, coaching, makes sense, but also media and media related to powerlifting. Can you just talk to us a little bit as the final segment here about having a media company? And so he's like, all right, I like lifting. I'm also going to coach people, but I'm also going to film it. Like, just talk to us about Twin Sons Media.
So it really started as a kind of a community give back post-pandemic. My friends and I who started the company, the co-owner, Omar, crew, shout out to Omar, really just wanted to ensure that the first meet back from the pandemic in 2021, the Regional Central Championship, was covered, right? Because, there were restrictions like slowly being lifted. We wanted the lifters to have, kind of a memento to this. A momentous occasion, right? It was also a chance for people to qualify for nationals the following year, and by virtue of that, Worlds, and being able to broadcast and also have documentation of that, which is kind of what I am, similar to you guys. Iron Culture, you guys are the historians and the curators of lifting culture. So we really wanted to be a part of that as well. So from then it just took on, and took off. We're like, hey, you just start this as a formal business, and pool our creative talents together, and we are who we are today after that.
Helms, this is what I said, man, where I said, Walter, not only listening to the episodes, but doing the damn things. Shout out to Brian Whitaker talking about maximizing given the constraints. That is Walter. He is him right there,
Yes.
folks. It's like, this is what we're talking about, Helms, when we talk about Iron Culture, and it's been amazing to have. First, it's an honor and a privilege to have a very good friend on Iron Culture, but it's because you're such a representation of true lifting culture, I think, in its highest form. But come on, Helms, like these are the stories. This is why we started Iron Culture.
No, I got so much respect for you, Walter, because if you look at what you've accomplished in the face of the many things you're doing and the challenges, how you made it happen during the pandemic, how you dealt with training around an injury, how you took 6 years off international competition to let it brew, to the fact that you're in your mid 30s, to the fact that you went from the low 90s to there's another minor thing that I'll point out. when powerlifters say I'm going to go up a weight class, it might be a 10, 12, or 7 kilo increase in body weight. Most of them see any weight between the top of one weight class and the top of the other as dead weight. And somehow in like a year, they put on 12 kilos. And it's like, that's probably not the best way to do that. But to see you steadily going up in weight, committed to the process and doing it is like Omar, you said, maximizing within the constraints. Like you were competing in the 102s and 103s. And most recently, there's not a lot of lifters that have that patience and that perspective and can hold themselves back from just kind of going quote unquote all in, which seems hardcore, but honestly, it's the easy way out. You know, it's easy just to go black or white, all chips in, all chips out. It's harder to have the self-moderation to do the kind of things you're doing, to make good attempt selection, to slowly gain weight, to put in the hours, and also to go, hey, I'm doing that while I'm also doing life at full speed without a few hours left in my day, where other lifters would try to carve more of their life away to make room for powerlifting. You're saying, here's my life. How can I optimize my powerlifting journey? And like Trex, you were saying, I think a lot of lifters have this false belief that that will result in some type of compromise. And maybe it does to some degree, but I think what you stand to gain and the mindset required to do that are much larger trump cards than what you might lose by not trying to create the perfect life that is structured around powerlifting. And for an amateur, a true amateur sport like powerlifting that's still in this developmental stage and may never get beyond kind of what other athletes would consider a developmental stage in terms of athlete compensation and resources available to them, it is the reality. And I think you're an excellent example of that. And it's just I think it's awesome to see. I think you're a great representation for other lifters. And yeah, your example of Jess, you know, when I was working with her, you know, I'd be like, hey, here's a theoretical 6-week block. It might take you 8, but you're a pharmacist working at Walmart, you know, in the post-pandemic era. Like, you do what you got to do. And, you know, in her case, that was good enough for a couple of world championships. And in your case, you're still on the rise. I would not be surprised if we don't see you on the podium and next time or in the near future, or even maybe topping the podium, because you're crushing it. You're still improving. And like you said, you have the desire to keep doing this until you can no longer physically do it, which I love. So you're singing songs to my soul, and they will sing right back at you. So that's all I got to say.
Love it.
Appreciate you, man.
Trex, any closing thoughts before we wrap it up?
I think Helm said it all. And most importantly, I was stunned with your knowledge of Lord of the Rings trivia. I thought I was going to stump you, but you studied up. I feel like maybe Omar gave you a heads up and kind of said, hey, make sure you brush up on things, but that's fine. Whatever. All good for the show. But no, I really appreciate your time chatting with us and appreciate you sharing your story. And hopefully it inspires other people to, focus more on dedicating to the lifelong lifter lifestyle and, being all about doing the thing and, following in your footsteps.
Thanks. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here as a lifelong listener and a big fan of all your guys' work.
Come on now. This is just the mutual respect round. This has been another episode of Iron Culture. All the social media will be linked down below. If you're in the GTA, check out Twin Suns Media. We look forward to seeing the next competition, Germany 2025. Can't wait to see what you do, man. You could go ahead and leave a rating and review on iTunes. It does help us out. 5 stars is typically what people leave, but as we've discovered recently, I actually read a review, Helms, you don't know this yet because the episode's not out, with Trex, knowing that myself and Trex could process it. It was 5 stars. It was 5 stars. Trex reacted to it, but I think it was better that perhaps just for that one, it was the both of us.
Helms takes every review under 6 stars personally. I think that's how I would frame it.
Right.
I hold us to a high standard. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, that makes sense. So go ahead and leave a rating and review on iTunes. We're back every single insert date here from now until the end of time. We'll catch everyone in that next episode. Until then.